Learn All Things Cyber with T. So today we'll be diving into different topics. But first of all, before we start to dive into those topics, if you would like to follow up with some of the materials I'm using for some of this topic, I'm picking some of those topics by discretion, what I think people need basically to start with, so that when we go deeper into the course, when it gets tougher, then you have an idea what some of those words mean that I've started with in the beginning. So basically I'm using Security Plus guidelines. Require me to come over here. So let's start. We'll be starting from the very basic, that anyone who have no idea what cybersecurity means could watch this YouTube video and will be able to understand in the simplest form what cybersecurity is all about. So today we will be looking into few things, and one of the few things we'll be looking into is, what is cybersecurity? I know, some of you have heard about cybersecurity a lot, but you don't know what is it. Is it just a role? Is it just a job? Do I have to be an hacker? Some of those things. So I'll just tell you in simplest form what cybersecurity is. And also, in the teaser video, we talked about something called CIA. And this CIA is like a fundamental model that has 3 principles attached to it. So let's say, for example, you, like we said, would analyze what cybersecurity is. But if you would look at it, even without me telling you what the definition of cybersecurity is about protecting your information. So these are the principles that govern protecting your information. And without CIA, we can't talk about any other thing in cybersecurity. It is from CIA that every other thing sprang forth in cybersecurity. So if I define CIA for you, then I would also briefly look at what opposite of CIA means. And really, opposite of CIA is something we call DAD. Many people don't know it, but it's just an English word. I'll explain it as we go further. And then immediately after we talk about CIA and the opposite of CIA, we'd also look into what access control concept means. We'll look into it. We previously mentioned that when unauthorized users don't have access to information, then it's called confidentiality from the teaser video. So we will look into access control. What is access control? Now we will look into few concepts that is associated with access control. After looking into the concept, then we'll look into the types of access control that we can have. Afterwards, I'll define like maybe 2 terminologies that is somehow related to how people have access to their task and thereabouts. And after that, I'll move quickly to security control, concept or principle. So how we control when it comes to security, how do we put control in place, prevention in place? That's what we call control in security. And then we'll quickly dive into security control functionality types. These are everything I'll be discussing today. I'll take it one step at a time, and I'll make sure I explain. If I use a word that you don't understand, a terminology that you don't understand, please put it down in the comment section, and I'll be able to answer all of your questions. So let's dive into the first part. So what is cybersecurity? Cybersecurity is a practice. It is a practice where you protect your information, your computer, your network. You would get to know what computer networking is eventually. everything that you can protect from an unauthorized user. Who is an unauthorized user? Somebody who is not supposed to access your information. It's as simple as that. You are the authorized user because you should have access to your things. An external person shouldn't have access to your things. They are the ones called unauthorized users. So what is cybersecurity? Cybersecurity is just a practice where you protect, some of these, your assets, from an unauthorized user, or from attack, from destruction. Sometimes, you're keeping your ID so that it doesn't get lost. What does that mean? It means that someone else can pick your ID and use it, and that's identity theft, that kind of thing. So cybersecurity is what we do every day, and we have no idea that we are doing. You are an ATM spot, you're trying to put your PIN to withdraw money, you're guiding it because somebody is at your back. This is cybersecurity. You're protecting your information. So that is what cybersecurity is. It's just a practice whereby you protect your own information, your own data, your computer, whatever needs to be protected from unauthorized user, from attack, from damage, from destruction. This is everything that cybersecurity is about. That's what we do every day, one way or the other. Whatever role that exists in cybersecurity is just to protect ourselves from damages, protect employee, protect organization, protect church, protect our family members. That's what cybersecurity is about. Now, I mentioned that we have these, 3 principles by which we base our information security on, how secured our information is. And I mentioned it in the teaser video initially, that C is called confidentiality, I is called integrity, and A is called availability. So I'll quickly explain them again since this is the first video. So what is confidentiality? Confidentiality means that you have your information protected from unauthorized users. So it means that your information is only accessible to you. An unauthorized user cannot have access to this information. So that's when we say, okay, we have really ticked confidentiality. Now, what is integrity? Integrity means that your data or your information is accurate, is consistent, and is unmodified by an unauthorized user. So for example, I want to send an information to somebody. The information remains the same. It is accurate, it is consistent, it is not altered. So if I'm sending you ABC, you are exactly receiving ABC. Now I'll go back to confidentiality. So how do we ensure, confidentiality? Sometimes we ensure confidentiality through encryption. And I know maybe, few people might not exactly know what encryption means. So encryption means that, I'll explain from a normal day-to-day perspective. So say, for example, you went to run a test at, in the hospital, and then the result of your test comes in. I know for some of us that, use this method to get our result, you might need to put a username and a password to get your result. But one thing happens when you have a prompt to put in an information that no one else would have. It means that somehow the document has been locked. Let's call it locked. But, I'm just using a very watered down example, but it's an example. So sometimes they ask you to put your social security number or your surname or your first name or something like that, or your whatever they need you to put to be able to access that information. So it means that any other person who is unauthorized, who is not the owner of the medical record, would not have access to the information. But because it's your information, you know what they are asking from you, you input the information, then you have access to the document. So I just quickly went back so that you can have a practical example for confidentiality. Integrity. So when it comes to integrity, an example could be something we call hashing or checksum. I would explain this concept, as we go down the line. But what you need to understand at this level when it comes to integrity is that the data is unaltered. The data is consistent and accurate. Like, one letter is not missing, 2 letters is not missing. That's when we say that we have really checked integrity. And what does availability mean? Availability means that the information is accessible as at when needed by an authorized user. Don't forget, we are talking about authorized users. If the information is accessible to an unauthorized user, then no, it's not availability. Availability means that you need to check your bank details. You need to check your account balance through your bank app. And you log in and you're able to check this information at any time that you need to check the information. That's when we say that availability has been ticked. And I talked about, the opposite side of it. So when we have a question regarding these three, then what do we have? We have something called DAD. So DAD means disclosure, alteration, and destruction. So when your information is accessible by an unauthorized user, it means that the information have been disclosed. So it's used in the English word concept that that information has been disclosed to someone else who shouldn't have access to it. When we say alteration, it means that that information that should be unaltered has been altered, and this is why we have the opposite of integrity as alteration. And then destruction. Destruction could mean that I will put it in the concept of, let's say, a web page. You're trying to access a part of a website, and because an attacker has gone there, destroyed that part, you as an authorized user would not have access to that that section of the web page or whatever. If they have caused a deface to the web page, you might not have access to it. If they've hacked into your your bank app, whatever it is, when you needed, if they have destroyed it, I'll use the word destruction, then when you needed the information, you wouldn't be able to access the information as at when you needed it. So I hope you understand this few point. And then quickly, we will move to access control. So what is access control? So what is access control? Again, it's an English word. How do we control access? Access to information, access to database, access to systems, access to network, whatever you can think of. How do we control it? It's like saying if you leave everything open to anybody, then anybody could access it. It's like leaving the door of your house open in the morning when you go to school or to work or wherever you need to go to. It means that anybody could access your, your apartment, take whatever they need to take. And that's why we need to put, access control in place to make sure that not everybody or unauthorized person would be able to access our house. And that's why we have the lock in the physical perspective. We do have the lock. If you need somebody to access your house, you need to give them the key to access your house. So that is what access control is about. So we have few concepts when it comes to access control. We have something called identity or identification. Identification. We have authentication, and we have authorization. So what does all of these concepts, what do they mean? What is identification? Identification means saying that who are you? That's what it means in plain terms. Identification, identify yourself. Who are you? Authentication, prove it to me. Like, I tell somebody I'm Temitope Shobolo, they'll be like, prove it. Because any other person will walk in and say I'm Temitope Shobolo, you get. So authentication means prove it. Identification is who are you. And authorization means what can you do? In simple context, context, can you do? So let's go back to you're trying to log into a platform. So I'll use it to explain. Now, before you try to log into a platform, you try to sign up. If you remember, for many of you who have signed up on different platforms before, you try to sign up, like let's say, sign me up with my Google, or I need to put an email and password. That is your identification, like signing up. Now, when you're done signing up, you want to sign in. Remember when you signed up, your username and password is added to the system. So the system have it. Who are you? The system have asked you, who are you? You've given the system your username and your password. Now you want to sign in. The system is saying, you know, you come to the system, you're like, I'm this person. The system is saying, put in your username and password. Let me check if you're really who you said you are, because I have a record of everybody that should access me. So you need to prove it. And that's when the system allows you to sign up. So whenever you try to sign up into a system or, you know, a platform, and you see all those rolling and then you click login, everything that happens at the back end is that the system is trying to check, do we have somebody like this with us? And then you prove it. Now, what is authorization? Authorization means that, what can you do? Now, I don't know how to explain it plainly, but it means that when you have access to a system, you might not have access to everything in the system. So say, for example, I will deviate a little bit and use the concept of document. I know many of us have created document before, and sometimes when you're trying to share that document with your colleague, you're either putting them on view, can view, or you're putting them on can edit, or you know that kind of access. So that's what authorization means. Authorization means that when you put somebody on can read, they can't edit that document. When you put somebody on can edit, it means that they have access to edit documents. So authorization means, what can you do? And I wanted to also talk briefly on two concepts. One is non-repudiation and one is accounting. So I'll speak quickly on accounting first of all. They are also still concepts of, you know, access management, access control rather. So accounting is somehow related to accountability. So accountability in the sense that, you know, keeping track of who did what, when they did it, and how they did it. They usually use this accounting part for audit trail. So say, for example, something happened and they want to track, you know, what happened, the timeline around it. They could see it in the system. And it's part of, you know, the kind of access they've given to people. So who did what, when they did it, now they did it in the system is what accounting is related to. And we have the last one when it comes to access control concepts. Don't forget, we are defining the concepts, just, you know, few concepts related to access control. Now we have something called non-repudiation. Non-repudiation means that a person cannot deny making a transaction, doing a process, or, you know, whatever they have done in the system. Non-repudiation means that they cannot deny it. Say, for example, you know, somebody had logged in and the system had tracked that, you know, the login was by Temitokbe. I cannot deny it because it's visible. So now, say, for example, I logged in into my system, someone else did something else, the system will record that I did it because it was under my login. So I cannot really deny. We just have to, you know, find other means. Maybe there's a camera that spotted the person or thereabout. But non-repudiation means that a person, the concept itself means that a person cannot, deny doing a process, making a transaction. Okay, I'll water it down a little bit. So the watering down part of it, it's a lot of watering down, but the watering down part of it is that, for example, let's say you are at home, your friend took your ATM card, knows your PIN, went to the machine, you know, withdraw money. As we all know, there is a camera around ATM machine. So say you got home, you know, you got an alert and you're wondering, I didn't use my card, you know, how come money was missing from my account, blah, blah, blah. You went to the banking or went to the manager's office and they decide to pull the camera around the time when the money was withdrawn. And you would be able to see on camera that it was this person. So in so doing, the person cannot deny because there is evidence that the person actually did what they did. So this is the end of access control concept. We'll quickly dive into access control types, and let's go to access control types. So what is access control types? Now it's different types that you can use to control your access in the system. You know, initially we talked about the concept, you know, how it works, identity, you know, identification, authentication, authorization. Now we are diving into, you know, the types that people use to control access in the system. And we have the first type to be dark, we have the second type to be MAC, and we have the third type to be RBAC. So, or reback, whatever it is. So this is access control types. So what is DAC? DAC is discretionary access control. AC is access control, mandatory access control, and we have role-based access control. So basically, what is discretionary? Discretionary looks like an owner-controlled access control. Let me just put it that way. So for example, I use the concept of creating a document a while ago. So it means that for discretionary access control, if maybe your company or a part of your information is based on DAC, it means that the owner of the document or the file or the resource is the one who determines who have access to it and what access they have. So they are left to decide that, you know what, I'll give Sikira a read access to be able to just read the document and not make any edit to the document. I'll give, Sikiru, I don't know why I'm using Sikiru anyway. I'll give Sikiru, and those are names in Nigeria, by the way. So I'll give Sikiru, a read or an edit access. So that is discretionary. The owner themselves, the owner of the file, the owner of the resource determines who they want to give. Now, for Mac is strictly controlled, and usually it's not very popular. Like, companies don't use it a lot. It's always used, around military sector and government sector. They are very strictly controlled. They are used to, they are based on policies. There's always a high level defined policy. Say, for example, maybe this type of people will have, access to classified information, or this category of people won't have access. You know what I mean? If you have watched 0 Day before, you understand what classified information, 0 Day on Netflix, by the way, you understand what classified information means. So maybe the president and vice president are just the only people who have access to classified information. Maybe the executive assistant doesn't. So it's predefined by policy. They already have a policy, so there's no deviation from it and say, okay, no, because this person is my friend, this person should have access to the information. No, they shouldn't, because it's predefined. Now, role-based access control. Sorry. So for role-based access control, it is dependent on your role in the organization, usually, or in a group or whatever it is. So say, for example, an HR person might have access to payroll information, how much salary each person is earning. Somebody in IT will probably not have that same access. Maybe somebody in IT has something entirely different. So it is always predefined based on your role. And in a case where you are moving roles, say for example, you're going from HR to become an IT personnel, it will be changed in the system because you have changed role. See, it's strictly by role. So somebody like me in cybersecurity, I don't have business knowing how much people earn. I don't have business knowing their level in the organization. I don't have business knowing their tax information. But somebody in payroll, somebody in accounting might need that information because they need to probably send something every month so that people can get paid, their bank details, whatever. For me in cybersecurity, I don't need that information for anything. So because I don't need it, I won't have access to it. So because HR person or payroll person needs it, they would have access to it. So it is called role-based access control, and it's usually defined in the system. So once you're taking up a particular role, they define it, or in a group or whatever it is. It's like also creating an Excel where people's salary are. If you don't have business with people's salary, even if you have it on read, you might not be able to make edit to it. But usually if you don't have business with it, you don't even have that document in any way. The document will be just for the people who need it, who are functional in that role. I think that's a lot of information to process. Like I said, you can check in with ISC Square CC to follow up with some of these things I'm teaching. And if you have any question, use the comment button below. I was mentioning initially terminologies that are related to access control. So I have two more terminologies that are related to access control that I'd like to share with you because you might see it going forward. And the first one is called segregation of duties. It's called SoD for short. So in cybersecurity, when you have somebody ask you, SoD or talk about SoD, so they meant segregation of duty. So SoD. I will still, eventually tell you what it meant. And then the second part to it is called least privilege. So least. So if somebody asks you to define, least privilege after this session of the class, you should be able to explain to the person what least privilege means. So let's start with what SoD means. What is SoD? SoD it means segregation of duties. It means duties are segregated. But in cybersecurity, what it means is that no single person have complete control over a business requirement or process or a security function. So, for example, there is a process from beginning till the end. So, I will bring it down, water it down a little bit. So, let's say people who are in payment and people who handle invoice. So, no single person should be able to complete the process of, receiving the payment request, processing it, approving it, and sending it to the bank for payment. Now, if there is no segregation of duty, there will be fraud, there will be error, there will be insider threats. And you know what fraud is, you know what error is. Insider threats means that whether accidentally or intentionally, somebody inside within the organization, within a particular group, is a threat, could cause damage to whatever you have, the assets in the organization. So if there's no segregation of duty, things like this are bound to happen. But with segregation of duty, let's say, for example, you receive the request, to make a payment, you process it, there should be someone else who will do the approval. And when there is someone else who does the approval, and then there should be someone else who put the bank details for the bank to make the payment. In so doing, this process is called segregation of duties. It means that the duties are segregated between different people. So no single person should have the complete control, from beginning to the end. Because if one single person does the approval, process it, send it to bank, that person could as well put their, account details and have the bank pay the money to them, which will lead to fraud. So that's the segregation of duty. Now, least privilege. Least privilege means that people are only given, or employees, or in a group, are only given the minimum requirements that they need to complete their task. Say, for example, you only need access A, B, C to complete your task. Least privilege is a principle that says that you should not be given access A, B, C, and D because you don't need D. If you don't need D to complete your task, D should not be given to you. So that's what the principle of least privilege means. So least, minimum requirement for you to complete your task. If you don't need an extra one should not be given to you. So I hope you understand these two concepts. Now, we will quickly run through. Like I said initially, that I'm trying for this video to be as short as possible so that people can then, have, understanding of how it looks. Now, we talked about access control. I'll be diving back to what we call security control. Now, when it comes to access control, security control is on top of it. But the reason why I talked about access control was because I talked about CIA, people having access, or unauthorized users having access, and the rest. So that's why I dive straight into access control. Now, let's talk about security control. So for security control, these are controls that are put in place, of course, to secure whether, our physical environment, to secure, maybe to use technology to secure our assets in the company, different means. So we have 4 types. We have the technical control, we have the managerial control, we have the operational control, and we have the physical control, if I had mentioned that. So technical, physical, operational, managerial control. So those are the controls that we have when it comes to security control. So what does technical control means? Technical control just means that we have technology in place in order to prevent or detect, threats, attacks. That's what technical means. It means technology. Technology in place like firewalls, like, having, different technology. We put VPN in place so that you can have, a secured communication and the rest, things like this. That's what technical means. Managerial means that we have policies, we have procedure, we have guideline in place. I'm sure you have heard something like, security standard, security policy, or information security policy or procedure. That's what managerial means. It means that we put this policy in place to prevent and detect or mitigate threats, whatever, however way. But you remember, I told you, control means, to prevent, to detect, and in order to be able to mitigate. And mitigate means, to solve the attack. whatever it is. It's also an English word. So what does operational means? Operational means day-to-day operations or operational activity that we perform in order to do the same function to prevent attacks. An example of operational is where access control will fall. So access control falls under day-to-day operational things that we do to prevent threats. Say for example, also something like simulated phishing. So I know many of you are familiar with what phishing email looks like. So phishing email means that you get an email from an attacker to click a link to buy something or thereabout. So usually, organization also conducts simulated phishing campaign, and this is to prepare employees so that they don't eventually, get attacked with the real fish. So all of this process falls under operational and physical, like the word. It means that physical things are put in place to prevent, threats. Things like, let's say in the server room of an organization, you need a card reader or you need a kind of special card reader in order to get into it. So it means only specific people who have that card reader, and this is physical thing put in place. Or maybe there's a perimeter part of organization that normal people are not supposed to get to. They might put a blockage there or a security guard. All these fall under physical. So that is security control types. Now we have security control functional types. And these functional types, all of them are just English words, and I would explain them briefly. So we already know, the 4 security controls we have. Now, their functional type, that's based on their function. We have, so based on their functional types, we have preventive, we have detective, deterrent, we have compensating, and we have corrective. So they are English words. Preventive means that the control is put in place to prevent an attack. It doesn't solve it, it just prevents it, put a stop. It doesn't allow the attack to happen. Detective means that it detects that there is an attack coming, but it won't prevent it. It will just store the information that somebody is trying to access with this IP, blah blah blah, but it won't prevent it. Deterrent is something that is used to scare attackers, and it could come in different form. Let's say, for example, there's a camera at the entrance of an organization, a camera at the entrance of a bank. The first thing an attacker is thinking about when they want to launch an attack, physical attack on that bank, is that, what do we do with this camera? So deterrence is like creating a fear in the mind of the attacker, so that that fear might result in them ditching the idea of attacking the bank. Now, compensating is a little bit tricky. So it's like we want to correct whatever has happened, but we don't have a means to correct it. So we will look for alternative means. I'll give an example. Let's say we have a legacy, a legacy system. And legacy system, by the way, means that a system that the vendor, those who sold the system to you, does not have a means to patch the system in case of an attack, in case of a vulnerability. They don't have a means. So that means you just have the system. You just have to find your way around the system. So in that case, we use things called compensating. You just look for alternative means, maybe to make sure that the system is not exposed to the internet. Because once it's exposed to the internet, that the attack surface is wider. So things like that is what we call compensating. And then for corrective, it means that you have corrective measures in place to solve the situation, as opposed to just preventing it or just detecting it rather. So I hope this helps, and see you next time. Bye for now.